Welcome to the top 10 comics of 2023. I've been reading single issues, picking them up at my local comic shop, reviewing them every single week. It's all led to this moment. It's the yearly tradition on the channel, so I've compiled a list of my top 10 series that have come out this year. Let's just get right into it. So starting with number 10 for the top 10 comics of 2023, I'm giving it to Saga. This is a pretty obvious choice. It's one of my favorite ongoing series. It obviously returned in, I think, 2021. It's had a couple story arcs that have happened since then. This one goes without saying. You've probably heard a lot about it already, but it's Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. They've created this whole intergalactic universe that has to do with two alien races that are at war with each other and this crossbreed child. It's been a lot. There's been a lot going on in this series. Honestly, my biggest thing against it right now is just that they don't come out with issues very often. The creators both have kids, I guess, now, so they take a lot longer of breaks in between story arcs, but really obvious choice to put in the top 10. I had to put it somewhere, so that's Saga coming in at number 10. Coming in at number 9, though, we've got Miracle Man by Neil Gaiman and Mark Buckingham. This is the Silver Age. I think this issue I have right here actually came out in 2022, but we have had a few issues of this series come out this year. It's a really solid title, right? So it's not exactly the main Marvel universe. It's actually set in its own continuity, but Miracle Man as a character has had a really long history leading up to the release of this new Silver Age series. Alan Moore had an original run with the character. He was originally this 1950s British comics character that was kind of supposed to mimic Superman that has had a return recently, right? So Neil Gaiman is finishing off his run with this character finally at Marvel. We thought we were going to get some pretty consistent issues, but this one has also been facing some really big setbacks. I think we've only had 2 or 3 issues in 2023, so we'll see how long it takes him to finish this run. Next up, though, coming in at number 8, we've got another Marvel title. This one is Guardians of the Galaxy. So this one has been really good so far. It's been set a year after the last Guardians of the Galaxy run, which was by Al Ewing, but we've got new writers on here, Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing. The art has been by Kev Walker, and it's had to do with Grootfall, which is this new form that Groot has taken. We got kind of an origin for it halfway through the series, I think with issue 6. But Groot has been going and taking over worlds, enveloping them in fire, but it turns out there's some kind of mystery behind it where he's actually trying to rebuild these worlds in his own image. It's gotten a little bit complicated, I will say, with the backstory and everything, but the artwork in this has been really good. I've liked seeing the Guardians in such a raggedy place, right? Really at their lowest, with Rocket Raccoon grieving his friend and everything. Just them trying to get Groot back. It's seeming like this series might actually end after this story arc is over, which is kind of unfortunate, so maybe their sales weren't too great, but it is a recommendation from me. Really good double page spreads and big stuff happening in this book. So yeah, Guardians is going to be coming in at number 8 this year. Next up, though, at number 7, another one of the biggest releases from an independent. This is from Image Comics. It's Void Rivals. So this is number 1. The series started this year, and it was also a really big deal when it came out, made headlines and everything, but it was a big deal because it kicked off the Energon universe, right? So it's Robert Kirkman kind of at the helm of everything. He writes this series with co-creator Lorenzo De Felici, who he's worked with before on Oblivion Song, but the Energon universe is the shared universe between Transformers, this series, and G.I. Joe. So over the last few months since this came out, we've had more of a rollout of all these new series coming out. This one specifically, I feel just stands really well alone, outside of G.I. Joe or Transformers, even though they've got that whole shared universe going on now. I think that Robert Kirkman is great at space stuff. It has to do with these two warring races that are on two sides of a black hole, and a crossover between two of them and how they get to know each other. They're finding out that their species are more similar than they think. There's a bunch more that goes into it, but big recommendation from me so far. Next up, though, coming in at number 6, I've got another Marvel title. This one is Doctor Strange, and it's been great so far. Pascal Ferry is the artist on here. It's definitely really trippy, getting into weird and magical stuff with Doctor Strange. I feel like it's the most creative Doctor Strange artwork has been over the last few years, and that's really what you want from a title like this, really getting into the mystical side of everything. And then we've got this really cool storyline going on over the last 10 issues, I think. It just wrapped up with number 10, which was the latest issue, where we see this future version of Doctor Strange, this warlord version of him, who's involved in this 5,000-year war in some kind of subdimension that the Vishanti expelled him to. Him fighting with that version of himself. And yeah, Jed MacKay is great at writing solo titles. This and Moon Knight are my favorites from him. So that's Doctor Strange coming in at number 6 this year. Next up, though, we're down to the top 5. So these are the big ones, right? My top 5 comics of the entire year. Coming in at number 5, another Marvel title, we've got Punisher. So this is the cover to the last issue, number 12. I wasn't sure whether to include this one or not because I think only the last 3 or 4 issues of this actually came out this year. This is great to keep up with month to month. Each issue is oversized, and we've got a couple different artists on here. It's Jesus Saiz and Paul Azaceta, and then Jason Aaron, of course, is the writer. He's already written Punisher stuff in the past, I think, but this is kind of a magnum opus conclusion organization that reads really well as telling a story of Frank Castle's entire life. And then also in the present, we have this bigger storyline going on where he's joined this ninja organization who's like resurrected his wife, is trying to resurrect his kids in order to be this like savior, kind of representation of an evil god for them. So it's Punisher leveling up his powers, which I think was a little bit controversial. A lot of people didn't really know what to think about that. He was more powerful than he'd ever been before, but it does end with him kind of leaving the Marvel Universe and pursuing something else. Great read, and it's a big recommendation from me, so that's why it was at number 5. Coming up next, though, at number 4 this year, I've got an Image Comics title. We've got Big Game. So this is Mark Millar's big shared universe title. Is the first like crossover between all the characters that he's created within his Image Comics universe, which I think he calls Miller World. I went into this pretty blind, actually, so it's pretty amazing that this made it to the top 5 for me. I really don't know what to expect, but when I saw that Pepe Larraz was going to be doing the artwork on this one, it was a must-buy. I just thought it was a well-done crossover, right? I'm used to like Marvel Comics crossovers like King in Black, War of the Realms, stuff like that, but this is a really well-done, like self-contained 5-issue miniseries that all came out this year that had to do with this history of there being superheroes that rise up in superhero eras where more and more superpowered beings will continue to appear, and then it turns out that there's like these super villains that have had control over every government in the world that wipe them out every time it gets out of hand. But amazing artwork. I thought it was really well written, and I cared about a lot of the characters even though I hadn't read any of their like solo series leading up to it. So I'm sure it was way cooler even for somebody that's a long-term fan. Next up, though, coming in at number 3, I've got another Image Comics title. This one is World Tree. So just like Void Rivals, this is one of the biggest Image Comics releases of the year, probably one of the biggest independent releases of the year also. It's James Tynion IV. Obviously anything that he touches these days, any new ongoing series he's going to come out with, is going to be a bestseller. That's just pretty much how it goes. This one I think has the strongest suit in just having like a really good concept, right? So it's this interesting thing where World Tree is this like computer virus that is able to take over people's minds somehow and send them on like killing sprees and stuff. It really has to do with the internet, the dark web, how that connect to real life. We've gotten a bunch of different like computer engineers introduced, all these people that created the World Tree virus that are now having to deal with it in the modern day. So it's having flashbacks to the past, even flash forwards to the future. We just got a new story arc of this one that started up with number 6, which I still have yet to read, but those first 5 issues are really good. I'm sure there's a new trade paperback out for that. So big recommendation from me if you haven't already heard it. I'm sure you have. World Tree has been great so far. That's why it's coming in at number 3 for me this year. Next up, number 2. So just 2 more titles. These are my very top comics of the entire year that I enjoyed the most. This next one is Once Upon a Time at the End of the World, coming in at number 2. This one hit me by surprise. I didn't even know it was coming out until I picked up that first issue, which I think came out in 2022. But the second story arc of the series has all come out this year. And it's basically just this like love story at the end of the world between these characters, Maceo and Mezzi. One of them is like kind of a more hard-boiled character who's been traversing the wasteland at the end of the world for a long time. And then the other main character is this kid who like was in a mansion when the end of the world hit, right? So he's got all this access to like food and entertainment and everything. So polar opposites and how they meet each other, how they create this paradise at the end of the world. And the second story arc of the series from issues 6 to 10 had to really do with that paradise, how it ends up falling apart, how the end of the world is kind of inevitable in this universe. But it's Jason Aaron, so he's got a couple entries on the list, actually, this and Punisher, right? And I've been really enjoying it so far. So that's a huge recommendation from me. So this is it, my top comic of the year. If anybody has been watching for a couple years now, I think this has been in my top 3 for the last 2 years now. Coming in at number 1, my top comic of the entire year for 2023 was Moon Knight. So this is the cover to number 30. This iteration of the series actually just wrapped up. My favorite ongoing series from Marvel easily over the last few years since it's been going. I think it started in 2021. The artist on this is Alessandro Capuccio, who did the art on this last issue. Really amazing artwork, kind of like a jagged style, but the colors work really well with it also. We see Moon Knight like shining off of the page in every single splash page that he's in. Just really well done artwork in general. I love how Jed MacKay is able to create like these kind of self-contained stories within each individual issue of most issues of the series, but then also have like these overarching storylines that are really important. We've had this villain, Black Spectre, who ends up being responsible for the last days of Moon Knight, which was like this last story arc of this part of the series, but it's being relaunched under the title Vengeance of Moon Knight next month in January. So, I mean, we'll see. Maybe top 10 comics of 2024. Moon Knight will also make it onto that one. But yeah, those were my top 10 comics of this year. I'm looking forward to knowing what you guys are thinking, though. Which was your top comics? Even if it's just a top 3 or something something I'd be really curious to know. Let me know down in the comment section below. If I was missing out on any really good ones from DC, yeah, let me know what you thought of my list. And I'm looking forward to a new year of comics in 2024. And yeah, appreciate you guys watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.